All right. Hey, Dan, appreciate you coming in here. In case anyone doesn't know about Dan Gaynor, he's the expert in all manner of different things. Tech, business and media reporting, culture and media reporting, all things censorship, and an all-around decent human being. So appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I've managed to deceive you all these years.
I heard you on Breitbart today, which I love satellite radio. I mean, maybe I'm one of the few because I've heard, people have been saying that satellite radio is just going to go the way of the dodo forever and ever and ever, and just continues to sort of chug along. And I just think it's like terrific bang for your entertainment dollar. But do you enjoy going on?
The absolute best part of this job is doing talk radio.
Really?
Absolutely.
Why do you like it so much?
It's just a conversation. It's just this. And all it is, you go on, and after a while, you know all the hosts. So it is a conversation with friends.
Right.
And it's something the only difference is you're this in a bar is you're not drinking. Hopefully you're not drinking.
You and Alex had a really good rapport.
If you ever take one of those tests, those Myers-Briggs tests, I'm an extrovert, not extro. I don't really, don't put me.
What is that, some internet thing?
No, it's Myers-Briggs, it's classic.
Myers.
And I get energy from people, but only people I like hanging out with.
Yeah.
But a talk radio hosts are all people I like hanging out with. Like Sam Malone in Houston. Sam and I, if we live close to each other, we probably hang out all the time.
Did Alex, did you know you were going on to talk about the 60 Minutes?
Nope,
didn't? No.
Not a clue.
Not
a clue.
That's a little window.
Media is all-encompassing. It's every news story out there is how the media cover it. And in America, as internationally, in every single situation, the media push it to the left. You see it with, look at how they handle Imagine cinema. Oh my God, we've got to drag them back to the left. But if you're a rebel, similar rebel, let's say from Arizona, we're going to drag you to the left, and get you to disagree with Republicans.
Right.
So I have this kind of shorthand that the standard rules for the media: everything left is right and everything right is wrong.
Right.
And it's just, if you remember that, you're set.
Well, the talk radio audience are your activists. It's where your activists are living. They're not going to. I mean, who has time to watch cable news all day long? I mean, I guess junkies like we do. But
one of us, however, is actually paid to watch media.
Yeah.
So it's a little easier for me. Like,
I tell people all
media.
the time, like, Dan's with Media Research Center. I tell people all the time, it takes, like, you have to have like a good screw loose in order to do it. In order to process all the incoming and put up with all the BS that's spit out there, particularly on CNN, MSNBC.
Well, I mean, I credit, because one of the worst things ever happened to me, it's kind of both. Rob Bluey from Heritage, he used to work for us.
Yeah.
Back in 2008, Rob Bluey told me, he said, Dan, you got to get on Twitter. Twitter's where it is.
But said that?
Rob's the one who got me on Twitter. I give him full credit for destroying years of my life, probably. Yeah. But I mean, here it is. I'm not as young as most of the people, at the MRC.
Yeah.
And it made me relevant in new media going forward.
Yeah.
In a way that I probably wouldn't have been. For me, my second job out of college, I was working in traditional media. My second job out of college was a wire editor for a daily newspaper.
Right.
And that meant you read news all the day. It was great. I mean, give me a news talk. You're like, go read news, and you get to take some of it, we'll put it in the paper. It's like, you get paid to do this?
I couldn't.
Of course, I was going to get paid much.
If somebody paid me to read like fantasy football, I'd do that.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing. I just I could read internationally. I could read anything that moved on the wires.
Oh yeah.
It was nice. Now, admittedly, I paid garbage wages, but it was still fun. I've been reading newspapers. The first thing I ever remember reading on my own was the daily newspaper in Baltimore, the News American. I was reading the comics pages, and here it is. I mean, so that was the first job I got out of college was the News American.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you grade the media's economic literacy when it comes to reporting? I mean, because nobody seems to have a handle on inflation. Of course, big tech, and we'll get into the whole big tech stuff. But you're not allowed to blame Biden for inflation. You're not allowed to blame Biden for gas prices.
Well, I give them
and just the press just goes along with it, like
I give them maybe a 2 because I think they know a little bit and then deliberately misreport it.
But where are you supposed to find someone who knows,
Well,
who has A, the knowledge, and B, I mean, you have to have some journalism training. So to sort of put that into a story and have the desire to write about it in a news sense, I mean, that's how many people would even qualify? Probably, I can probably count on one hand.
Well, I think a lot more than that. But I mean, you're right. It's a problem, but it's a problem with everything the media do. Journalism is a generalist industry.
Yeah.
Which is how everybody lies to everybody effectively. You bring an expert out to talk about whatever it is, politics, garbage disposal, anything.
Right.
And your typical journalist has done this particular beat for 6 months or a year, and so they lie to them. I was at a different convention many years ago, and they had somebody doing a whole presentation about how the Bush administration, not Bush, the younger, Bush the elder, had lied to every press outlet in America and gotten away with it.
Bush the elder?
Do you remember Hurricane Andrew?
Yeah.
Okay, Hurricane Andrew hit Florida. It was I think late in the month or whatever it was. Anyhow, when the unemployment stats came out the next month, there was a blip up, and they just explained it away because Hurricane Andrew, kind of caused some damage in Florida, and this person
it was the most devastating hurricane in the late 20th century.
Right, but it was only for part of the month, for part of the state, for some of the jobs, and this guy just went and dissected the maximum number of people could have been, and then showed the actual stats. It's like, no, of course this is not it.
Yeah.
But he said even the Wall Street Journal reported it wrong.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to buffalo journalists if you're from, particularly in that era before the internet.
Yeah.
It's harder now.
Yeah.
And we're one of the reasons why it's harder.
Yeah, that's true. Countless.
And for people watching this show, you don't understand how screwed up the fact-checking system is and how harmful it is to organizations. It's intentionally harmful.
Right.
Some college intern or 22, 23-year-old idiot, because that's basically who populates most of these fact-checking organizations. Some left-wing activist goes and fact-checks you and writes some basically diatribe saying you didn't cover this correctly, even if you did. And then you're forced to, have like 3 executive level people and a PR person or a marketing person. We all got to sit down and make sure you respond to point by point and tear it apart and kick it back to them on the slim hope that some scumbag organization like PolitiFact will then respond and cover it accurately.
I mean, I'm not even going to. So PolitiFact came after us.
And for people who don't know, that was not planned. I call them a scumbag organization based on other things they've done.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't even know who. Well, the oddity, they don't even date. I guess here it is, November 12th. I'll give them that much. So this was November 12th. This had to have been yesterday, but they had, so it says in context, Joe Biden's Negro reference to baseball player Satchel Paige. Oh, and so, everyone has seen the clip. Well, if you haven't by now, Biden referred to Satchel Paige as the great Negro of the era, or the great Negro at the time, which we weren't even. When we put it out there, our text was, we just played the clip in its entirety. Mm-hmm. And we just said Joe Biden referring to Hall of Fame pitcher Satchel Paige as, quote, the great Negro at the time sounds just as terrible as you think it would. Yikes. I mean, we're not imparting some sort of weird contextual argument to that. It
sounds bad.
It's just, and we're not even really passing judgment on the merits of what Biden said. It just, the delivery of it
sounds bad.
Sounds terrible. And, PolitiFact and every other liberal operation, Mediaite was one of the first ones.
Washington Post, Philip Bump, who's, got all the ethics of this table. Right. Philip Bump is out there, defending it like, it's just
what is there to defend? I mean,
it's just, see, this This is the heart of liberal journalism. The heart of liberal journalism is if you are conservative, everything you do is automatically wrong. We will destroy everything you did. If Donald Trump had said that, oh, it's because he's a racist.
Right.
Joe Biden, who has a huge racial history of, that frankly a lot of African-American liberals are uncomfortable with.
Yeah, it's quite lengthy.
And has been in politics for, more years than, your average, country's been around.
Right.
When he says something like this, it's got meaning.
Yeah.
But
I mean, where do you think, is fact checking like here to stay in the long term?
Well, so what journalists did, and they did this more than 10 years ago, they got angry at blogging. That's where fact checking comes from. It doesn't come from us. They got mad that ordinary people were blogging and getting attention. So, and they watched their industry. 2008, the Great Recession.
Yeah.
Was Great Recession. A recession for everybody, a depression for journalists. And
why? Just
journalism really took it on the chin, and large
even
part,
with the rise of Obama. I mean, you think that the clicks would be?
It's a combination of factors. One, people shifted online, and the economics of journalism were predicated on, people buying ads in newspapers that you couldn't really track their performance, but you bought ads in the newspaper. It was the local outlet.
Yeah.
Well, you can track the performance online, and clicks online cost a lot less than what, it's something like 1/10 of what you were paying in print.
Right.
And journalism hasn't figured out a way to offset that except for a few outlets.
Yeah.
Journalism used to be sort of mass market local for most outlets. But, with the rise of the internet, they lost all their ad categories.
So you know more about Soros than just about anybody I know.
Good thing.
I was down at the border over the weekend. I want to show you some stuff, but there were whispers among the locals, both in law enforcement and one guy mentioned to me at a bar. George Soros, they blame him for what's going on down at the border. Do you know like much about his philanthropy, like in Central America, South or Mexico? I mean,
first of all, George Soros.
Do you give any credence to it?
Well, the first credence is George Soros funds everything in the left. I dated a really nice girl back in like 2008, and liberal, and she mentioned Soros came up. This is before Soros was a big name. And she says, "Oh yeah, we know he funds everything." And when I say that, and people don't get how much he funds everything.
Yeah.
He gave a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, like I think it was probably like the fall of 2019. He gave $18 billion to his own charity. So he took his own money and put it in his own.
What's that? Open Societies?
The Open Societies Foundation.
Okay.
$18 billion. So if you invest $18 billion and even just get like almost passbook savings, percent, you figure 5% or whatever, you're pretty much just to keep your, you're supposed to give away like 5%. You give away
the foundations are required to give away 5%
right.
a year.
You give away $1 billion a year.
Yeah. It's insane.
And be breaking even.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a level of money. Basically, conservatives are going to be fighting George Soros until you and I are both dead.
Do you give any credence to the accusation that he's funding some of these caravans that are coming?
I don't know if
those are the whispers.
I think. Who the heck knows? Somebody is.
Yeah, somebody is.
Genuinely is. Somebody is. But there's so many players, and layers to those players. Did this group get funded this or that?
Yeah.
The people come from border down here and somehow get in vehicles because they're not walking the whole time.
Yeah.
Somehow large groups of them end up here.
Well, Mexico, so they got a caravan coming up now, and it's slowed down because I guess Mexico passed a law in the last couple of weeks saying barring anyone from picking them up in their cars and bringing them. So it's kind of dispersed In fact, we thought maybe we'd see the caravan when we were down there. We were in Del Rio, where all the hot spots were. I'll show you some pictures, man. Dan, it was crazy. I learned so much on this trip. Most of it was off the record, so I won't like give away names. But this lieutenant colonel who started talking to us on the first day, he said he's repeated this publicly, so I'm not breaking any news. He said that the cartels have operational control over the border.
Yeah,
and
because northern Mexico is a narco-terror state, and the rest of the United States suffers because of this, because we're not allowed to do anything. We're the only country in the world that's not allowed to enforce its border.
Right.
We're not on border with a friendly country. Mexico's a friendly country.
Well,
but they're not the ones on our border. The cartels are the ones on our border.
I actually mentioned this to someone down there. Said, this is so bad. Like, you might as well consider negotiating to change the border, to take over the Rio Grande and have the United States border be across the Rio Grande. And the officials down there said that they thought that it would, obviously it takes two to tango, but they thought that Mexico would probably be game for that. They wouldn't, care, except for the fact that the cartels have essentially operational control over the government as well. And so who's making the most money down there?
So basically, it comes down
That's where
to,
they're making their money.
It comes down to a simple thing.
This is where
walls only work when they're manned. So you can build a wall and you can make it difficult for people to get over or under.
Yeah.
But unless you put people on the other side and deter them, then they will come over.
Well, plus you've got, even if you build a wall 4 feet inside the United States border, if you get in those 4 feet, right, and I'm just making that up, 4 feet, right? It could be 1 foot. But if you're in, then all sorts of things legally start to happen.
Right, but they shouldn't.
They shouldn't, but it's just, the Texas border problem seems to be one that they don't have a real good solution.
Yeah, there is a solution. They should declare that the governor of Texas should call out the National Guard and say, we're closing the border.
Well, so
and defy the federal government. Say, sorry, anybody who brings in illegals across the border, we will arrest, and that includes government employees.
They don't have the people to do it. One district attorney told me that he's the only district attorney in this county, this border county. The DA told me that he typically deals with like 20 citations of trespassing per year, but this year it's 1,200. And he's one guy trying to process.
It's not enforced. It's a border that's not enforced. And in some defense,
but they can't close it. And they don't want to close. The locals don't want to close, which is really kind of a weird thing to see. Even though they're the most impacted, there's like this romanticism about like having land on the border and being able to walk across, see your neighbor, see the neighbor that you have in Mexico across the river or what have you. There's this, but so they're willing to deal with the bad guys in order to have that trade-off.
Right, but
and they don't want a 30-foot high.
But that's not their decision.
It is in Texas. It is.
But at
That's
some
why
point
the
in
wall,
time, it becomes a national security issue.
Well, I think that time is now. So
I think the time was a long time
sure.
ago. There, a couple of years ago, several years ago now, an academic did a study and said this whole 11 million illegals in the country is garbage. It was 22 million.
Oh yeah,
and we're bringing in 2 million a year now under Biden. 2 million a year.
Yeah. They said here. I wrote.
They're all going to be future voters. Every single. We're not going to send any of them back.
They said that they had. Where are the gotaways? They got 1 million apprehensions in 2021, and at least 400,000 gotaways. Right? There's the people that just they got away. Right? And I asked them. I said, how do you make? I understand that you think that the gotaway number is low, and why wouldn't it? But how do you track it in the first place? Like, how do you actually catalog that? And one of a former commissioner of Border Patrol told me, he said, it's the weirdest thing. He said, first off, you've got, infrareds and night vision, and so you're watching people go across, and so maybe you'll see a group of 10, but then there's like a group of 60 that are a mile behind you. That's where you have to turn your attention to, because you're only one guy. So you're going to go head back to the group of 60, but you counted the group of 10 and you just put them into a system. So like the United States debt clock, they just some government agency just has this being updated in real time, being refreshed like over a course of a couple minutes. But then he said the quickest way they count the gotaways, and he said the most effective, which I just thought was the strangest thing. So a good portion of the border is a dirt road, and they'll take like drag chain rakes, on the back of a truck, and they'll drag a chain link fence across the dirt road to sort of make it look pristine. So think of what happens at a baseball game when you clean the infield, right? Mm-hmm. So same type of deal, and then in shifts, they go back and count the footprints across this 10-foot road. And my jaw's on the floor. Like, we're supposed to be like this like mega superpower, and the only thing we have, and this is how like rural and rugged it is, and the lack of resources that we have down there, both state and federal and county and everything else in between, that we're just using rakes and counting footprints.
Yeah, but historically speaking, it's always been a hard border to control because it's so big.
Yeah.
And you've got a wealthy country here and a poor country here. And then poor countries below the poor country.
Yeah.
But I was watching one of my favorite John Wayne movies last night, The Undefeated. And the border actually it's a movie that takes place right along the border and then crossing the border into Mexico.
Right.
The movie takes place at the end of the Civil War. First, Rock Hudson.
The locals don't want to get rid of that romantic notion. I mean, maybe it's a Hollywood fabrication to some extent, but I mean, they love it.
Rock Hudson's group moves across the border, and Union troops try to stop them, and they give up because they only catch one wagon out of 17.
Yeah.
And then John Wayne's group is moving horses, and the Union wants to stop them because they want to buy some of the horses. They want to stop them from moving across. So they move across real fast. They can't stop them. And it's interesting because, in 1865 terms, it is about the futility of trying to control this massive border.
1855?
65, right. 65. Yeah. So it's,
right after the war?
Yeah. And okay, we can't control the border. Well, it's like, okay, yes, we can't. Here we are, 2021, we can't control the border.
Yeah.
But part of it is we can't. Most of it is we won't.
Yes, we don't have the will.
And, the will is... Basically, you've got to be jerks to people who, God bless them, I really don't fault anybody who comes in illegally.
Yeah.
Many of them they're coming for better economic opportunity. If you live in a crap situation, you were to come someplace nice. But there's 7.5 billion people in the world. We don't have room for all of them. Once you decide that we're not going to let them all in, you decide we're going to control the borders.
Yeah. They feel like the press abandoned them.
Of course they did. Of course,
and that nobody cared about them until the horsewhipping thing.
Yeah, and one of the few outlets we mentioned earlier that's from the right that's done a good job with the border is Breitbart.
Yes, yeah.
Brandon Darby and some others.
Yeah, and they've always done a good job down there. They actually had a piece Breitbart did that got a lot of attention over the weekend about how they were saying that federal agents were collaborating with smugglers. And I believe it. I mean, you could see that happening. I mean, so this is kind of this picture right here. This is what's it called? Caterina wire?
Concertina wire.
Concertina wire. They like this. The border guys like this, even though you could throw a carpet over top of it, and jump over it. But it's in lieu of anything is better than nothing, right? But then they've got
it is pretty nasty stuff to get tangled in. It was deployed a lot during World War II and subsequently.
Yeah,
cattle owners like it too. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of it down there. So they took us to this Del Rio spot. So this was the spot that was made famous. So you can see have the if you remember the nighttime footage of people walking down that little pathway in the forest. So that's Mexico, right? And you just kind of walk across, and it's all shallow. It's gorgeous. I mean, the ducks are plenty. You could just have a field day duck hunting down there. You could fish. I mean, I was like, I thought, man, it was a great little swimming hole. And the locals were like, well, maybe here you could swim. But if you go like 20 miles south downriver, on the Mexican side, they've got a water treatment plant. And Mexico doesn't have like the kind of cool environmental laws that we do. And they just send their duty out into the river, out into the Rio Grande, like 20 miles south of this spot. It was pretty gross. So,
well, also, and then there's the safety concerns of the cartel. The coyotes bringing people over if they think that you're a threat, they just can whack you.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what they said. So they said, the border guys said, I mean, you can see the kids' shoes. I mean, it's just crazy. They had, I'll show you the girl. I mean, it's just nuts. So this is to the right of what I just shown you before. Uh-huh. So what the border guys were saying said you can't really see them because it was during the day, but there are cartels all along that ridge line with guns pointed at us, and binoculars and everything else, and basically waiting for us to leave. This is somebody's backyard for their winter house because it gets so bloody hot in the summer. So what was happening, the homeowner saw this view, the one that I showed you previous, that view on television, on basically Fox, and realized wherever they were not at that house, realized that was like, holy shit, like that's our house, and why are thousands of Mexicans and illegals coming across?
Because it's your winter house and you ain't there.
And into her backyard. Right. I mean, they had been there forever, and they had never had a problem before. Never. And so they rush from wherever they were. They go back home. Their property is a disaster zone. There's just federal and state authorities all over the place, illegals all over the place. She ends up going to a town hall meeting that night and breaks into tears, apologizing to the city, to the town, like, we had no idea. And of course the town says, don't worry about us. I mean, it's not your fault at all. I mean, you didn't do this. But they had this in the house. Think of it as like an old rustic, beach house that you would see in the Outer Banks, right? Mm-hmm. It's just something on stilts for the river runoff. They had this deck, and Texas, like some sort of law enforcement agency had sort of perched itself on the deck because they're running like defense operations to get a view of the ridge line over of that picture. They had no idea. So they had to contend with like getting people off their property, apologizing to the town for like letting their guard down, even though it wasn't their fault.
And really, realistically, unless you're Jeff Bezos money or something like that, what are you going to do? And then you'd have to hire private security and you just push them to somebody else's yard. You'd have to hire an army. Yeah.
Well, I mean, some locals are all down with the fencing, but some of them are not. And that's kind of one of the underreported stories. And, getting back to this romantic notion of, they wanted to have that freedom. I guess one guy, who owns different parcels along the border. I mean, he ain't no dummy. He told the federal government, he said, if you want to park the National Guard on my ranch, I want a $500,000 check in my bank account before you set one foot to deal with any of the damages, because of course they're going to leave. It's a working ranch.
Yeah,
I mean, it's how they make their money. It's how they make their livelihood. It's a working ranch. He can't just like cut it off to an army deployment, unless, I mean, that's when you get into eminent domain issues, and basically that's why like the wall kind of stops in Mexico or New Mexico, and then there's huge gaps in Texas because it's all, unlike New Mexico, it's all privately owned, and that to me was like a real eye opener. So this, like behind me, that's again, that's the protection that this guy had, was the little barbed wire.
Yeah.
You know, what was and those little stakes. That was it. I mean, that's and that's Mexico
But
behind him.
You talk about the romance. So is it Robert Earl Keen, the guy who did Gringo Honeymoon?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, about going across to Mexico, you know, for your honeymoon.
Yes.
And I mean, yes, there's a romance to it.
Yes.
And see, I am multi-talented. I just whipped out.
I love Robert Earl Keen.
He's actually very popular with conservatives. Something
I don't care who he's popular. I mean, I love a lot of liberal. I mean,
yeah,
so
of
this
course.
is,
I love the Dropkick Murphys, and Lord knows they don't love conservatives.
so this was so this started happening. So this car rose up. Again, this is that ridgeline I was telling you about, okay? So this car rolls up, and it's a little shaky. But it's two girls. So that guy is a smuggler. She's the mother, or I guess, presumably the mother, coming across. She's at the back of the truck there. And they're going to walk down, and they don't really spot us yet, you know, from across, right? And so they're going to come down and just sort of sit down. And I mean, look how young these girls are. And when we got there was a mother and a girl who was no more than 3 years old. The most beautiful thing I had ever laid eyes on. And she was just singing to us. And she kind of knew that she was the object of everybody's attention. But, you know, there's nothing, you want to do, I mean, I would have given them everything that I had. And then when they make this trek across the river, what you saw the debris and the shoes, they just take their clothes off because they're wading through duty-filled Rio Grande water, and it's just smells. I mean, it's soaking wet.
But you said you would give them everything you had.
Yeah.
But
it was for a little girl.
No,
yeah, I would.
But you are.
Yes.
That's the thing. You are. We all are.
Yes, we are.
We have 22, 24, 26, whatever million illegals in the country. We're not going to send any of them back. And
no, we're not.
And so, yeah, we're paying for them.
A lot of these guys, the ranchers were complaining that they have there's dead bodies all over the place in the ranches. A lot of them get found in some of the like the hunting blinds, rattlesnake bites, coyote attacks. I mean, real coyotes.
Dehydration,
what have you.
Yeah.
So they're just left for dead. So now at this point they're waiting for us. If you see, we're just looking at each other, and they're waiting for us to leave. And the Border Patrol, one of the guys said they're actually probably scouts for another group a few miles away.
Of course, because you don't send obvious scouts. Scouts, you know, you don't send. Hey, you're like, hey, we're scouts.
Yeah.
You send people who look inoffensive.
But when you're sending children, and when you're sending children at the direction, I mean, when the cartel is sending children and either using them as scouts or sending them, you know, if they're coming or decoys, either way, they do have operational control over our border.
Drug dealers.
And all we're doing, and part of this is the Biden administration, and part of this is kind of in our history. We're just waiting for them to come. And so the Breitbart story was large. I can see how it's like totally correct. Yes, the Border Patrol is working with smugglers because it's just, you're not, one guy said, we're not going to throw women and children back into the river. And I don't blame him.
But so the alternative is anybody who has poverty. I mean, there's lots of poor countries below us. Lots of poor people. Millions, tens of millions of poor people, not just in Mexico, but every other, Nicaragua, Venezuela. Venezuela's collapsing.
Yeah.
You know, so basically we're just letting them all in, and anybody else who can come from anywhere else in the world, come here. There's no attempt to keep United States language, United States culture, United States, traditional religions, United States politics, whatever. We're bringing in people, and just like my ancestors and yours, people come here don't have anything.
No, they
don't. And so what do? they vote for people who say, "Oh, we're going to give you stuff."
It actually
What we're doing here is committing societal suicide.
Yes. But
it's slow motion.
And we're not even making a good trade out of it. One of the somebody said that what happened with the girls in particular, the women will sign contracts with the cartels where they pledge, like, okay, in exchange for our help in getting you over, you pledge like 75% of what you make. So, I mean, not that they were going to pay taxes anyway or contribute to the United States societal well-being anyway, but on top of that, 75% of what they make gets punted back to the cartel. And if they don't, if they miss payments, I mean, it's like a mob.
It is a mob.
It is a mob. If they don't, I mean, they have every member of your family like written out that they're going to kill if you don't pay them. You know, what you make for them in the United States in exchange for getting their help to walk across waist deep doo-doo water.
Also, what happens to women getting there? I can't remember how high, but it's some outlandishly insane, awful, evil number, like 70% or something, of women who head north through Mexico who are sexually assaulted on their way to the border.
Yeah.
And by having an open border like this, Joe Biden is basically encouraging rape. I mean, that's what he's doing. He's got every woman who comes up north who gets victimized.
And that's why I asked about Soros too, because I mean, if he's funding, like, I don't know what this guy's motivations are.
Well, I mean, he believes.
But if you're funding that to any degree, I mean, you're funding human torture, you're funding human trafficking. I mean, you don't like the United States, fine. I get it.
Back off whether he's funding it or not. In general, his position is he is a globalist. He considers America dangerous. So he loves the idea of taking America down a few pegs, and he wants us to be a global country, not a nationalist country. Now, the whole bit about nationalism, look, the guy grew up as a Jew in Hungary. I get where he would be wary of nationalism. I'm willing to cut him some slack on that one because he lived through the Holocaust. But we as a nation have a right to nationalism, and what the left is doing, whether it's him or not, what the left is doing in general is undermining our national identity, undermining our nation, because they don't like our nation. They don't like our national identity. They want us to be a global nation.
I get it. Look, I don't disagree. There's an ends that justify the means.
But see,
they don't I just cannot get on board. I don't care what his political motivation is or even worldview. I mean, you're sending young children.
Like I said, but I don't know whether he is or not.
Death trap. I mean,
anybody
that's funding this
but
stuff.
Certainly somebody is, but maybe it's just being funded by the cartels. I mean,
maybe it's a down payment.
Well, I mean, how expensive is it to put a whole bunch of illegals on a bus in South Mexico and drive them north?
I don't know.
You're not exactly doing a lot of TLC.
It's weird that your gut reaction was, you got to close it down. I mean, one of the things that we were told was, because remember the International Bridge? Mm-hmm. So they had, they closed it for like a day or maybe like a half a day, and then the mayor changed his mind because the locals got furious, because they estimated that every day that the International Bridge is closed, the city of Del Rio loses $18 million in commerce, because so much of their employee base is kind of based out in northern Mexico. So they're just coming across the bridge every day to work, and folks were forced to go like 2 hours out of the way.
Right,
but that's a big number for a small town. 18
but you could fix that with work permits for a limited number of people. You could fix that with work permits and let them come over. The problem is we don't track people who come in here illegally. We don't track people who come in here. A lot of the illegals are people who come in here and stay past their permits, and we don't ever do anything to them.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole system is a fraud. We've created a massive system that is a fraud. The whole thing. We don't enforce immigration in any way, shape, or form.
Did I tell you about the $3,000 it costs to remove a dead body I get into that. I mean, it's just insane. So how when somebody dies on a ranch, and they get left for dead, it costs the United States taxpayer $3,000 per body for that to be removed. And one of the things that they were saying was some of it was the frustration talking, but somebody on the panel said they really weren't cool with Fox's coverage of it because they thought that Fox was shedding light on different locations that the cartels, different physical locations that the cartels could use to exploit it. And I thought that was,
I think that's naive. The cartels,
it is naive.
The cartels know every spot along the border that they want to know.
Yeah, which is a totally different dynamic than, say, 10 years ago.
Well, but you look, historically speaking, northern Mexico, the huge parts of Mexico it's where bandits hung out.
Yeah.
And so now bandits have high tech and big forts and stuff like that, but it's still bandits and they're still controlling our border.
Yeah.
So there's no one way to fix it because, you've got the overstay problem and you got the border problem. So you got to fix both of them. So, and you got to do it in some way that you don't create some massive security state that we've already fighting on the other side.
Yes. Yeah.
So the first.
That's their big fear. That's some of the locals' big fear. They want it solved. Yeah, some of it is naive and that they just want to go back to the way it was.
But it's not going to. Because
technology is just this infusion of technology in a rural area, and then no one to police it and to man the actual physical boundaries. Now, pro-Trump officials will say, we had it under control, which, statistically, I guess that they did, particularly relative by comparison. But they need new tech. They need new resources. They need new bodies. I just fear every time you're going to have a Democratic administration, it's just going to spike. Every time.
Well, so, there's two important things. Historically speaking, back hundreds of years ago, the United States had a lot of empty, and it was hard land, and you had, Indians on it, and you had bandits on it, or you just had to, somebody to break the ground and grow stuff where nothing had ever been grown, like a farm before. Hard land needed hard people, and we didn't care where they came from. And so having an open border then mattered. But what happened is the left, Democrats, created the safety net. And they continue to expand the safety net. And so when you had no safety net, we were less responsible for people. Now an illegal immigrant comes in and we let them in. We're responsible for the health care, somebody who might have $1 million disease.
Yeah, it's true.
Or if they choose,
there's so much COVID down there. I mean, that you would never know, obviously. Right. But it's just or so much COVID coming across.
So in the middle of a pandemic, you have an administration that is importing illegals deliberately to bring in COVID into Texas and other border states. That's why Texas needs to close it down and say the federal government is committing a crime against humanity by bringing in illegal immigrants with COVID. We are not going to allow. We're simply going to shut down the border and force you. And you're welcome to try. You send any government officials go there and try to man the border. We'll arrest them.
The cool thing down in Del Rio was this harmony between the locals, both Mexican and American, cowboys and maybe they were guest workers or just coming across for the day and just having a beer. There was this Haitian reporter at the bar who ended up doing karaoke and singing Frank Sinatra's "My Way." So you imagine you're in a Texas border bar filled with Mexican Americans and old cowboys, us. As sort of like the city slicker white guys, and a couple of a Haitian news outlet, and then some off-duty state troopers. That's the other part about what we saw down there. You don't realize the infrastructure that it requires to run this thing. Every single hotel is booked to the brim with state troopers. Every parking lot in a hotel has state. I mean, I thought when we checked in, like, oh my gosh, what crime scene did we just embark on? But every single hotel has just 80% filled with state troopers that are just doing like 3 to 6 month shifts. I mean, it's crazy.
But like I said, the net result. This is why it's all a fraud. Our whole immigration.
Why do you say fraud though?
Because we're not sending anybody back.
No, we're not. No.
We're just sort of half-assedly processing them.
Yes.
And we're not even tracking who's doing it. We're just bringing them in and saying, "Come on in. Uncle Sam's going to pay for absolutely everything you want.
Yeah.
You want a home? We're going to pay for it.
Here's your NTA, your notice to appear, and we know you're not going to appear.
Right. And by the way, if somehow you got separated from the kids, that you didn't bring documentation, so we had no idea whether you were their kids, whether they were your kids, or whether you were trafficking those kids.
Yeah.
Then we're going to pay you $450,000 or whatever number that ends up being when they finally settle it out.
Yeah.
It's a fraud.
That's so. I mean,
it is Joe Biden. It is big corporations that want these. It is our political system. They are robbing every single American of their birthright. They're robbing every single American of their money.
Yeah.
They're robbing every single American of their future. They're destroying the country. Not that the illegals who are coming in are bad people.
Yeah.
They're not.
Yeah.
That's what makes this so hard.
I Googled, because yes, you do see the evidence of their existence in and around Del Rio, but obviously they're being shipped off all across. I mean, DeSantis got a lot of attention over the weekend saying he was going to send the illegals that he sent to Florida, that Biden sent to Florida. He was going to put them on a plane and send them to Delaware, which I thought was great. But
it'd be a lot better if he really does it.
Do you want to see something weird? If you Google detention centers, like illegal alien detention centers or ICE detention centers, I mean, they're all over the country. So, I know this problem, people kind of consider it sort of out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Texas, should figure it out for themselves, or New Mexico and Southern California should figure out for themselves. They're being put on planes and just parked in every major metropolis and suburban area. Just go Google those maps.
Washington, D.C. I mean, we have the problem here too.
They're all over. There's a big one in Charlottesville.
So what we're doing is we're spending enormous. I mean, we'd almost be better off just pulling everybody from the border and saying, "Y'all on your own."
Yeah.
And you guys got to
get that sense.
It's like, okay, we're going to save the money, because all we're doing. That's what I mean. That's why it's a fraud. We're not trying to stop a single person. We're not checking them at the border. By the way, are you an axe murderer? Are you on drugs?
Yeah.
Do
you have COVID?
Right. We're not doing any of
Nope.
that.
Nope.
No sane nation. A sane nation would do what Poland's doing right now and put people on the other side of barbed wire and say, "Don't come in."
Yeah.
But again, I understand these are not generally. There are some bad people coming across, but they're not generally bad people. They're people who want opportunity. We're the land of opportunity. I get that.
Yeah, sure.
But when we were just the land of opportunity, I was, much more down with it. Now we're the land of giving.
Yeah.
We give whatever you want. Coming into America, we will pay for your health care. We're going to put you on welfare. We're going to pay you for this, pay you for that. Oh, and by the way, we're not even going to make you learn English. We're not even going to make you learn American ideals. We're not even, the people who are doing this, the Biden administration, don't even believe in American ideals.
Well, but it's wild to be in that border setting, because you've got. I was talking to a bartender. She said, I don't mind that they're coming. I just want them to do it the right way, which was the sentiment of a lot of people in the room. Just about everybody. But, when you've got a Haitian reporter singing Frank Sinatra and Mexicans and cowboys alike are singing along with her, I mean, it was beautiful, man. I mean, that was America.
That's back from when we used to export American culture and believe in it.
Yeah.
Now what are we exporting? Twisted craziness that comes out of Hollywood now.
Yeah.
That doesn't support America. Frank Sinatra, loved this country.
Yeah.
And,
Probably would have got along okay with the cartel, though. Right? I mean, he was a little bit of a mob guy, right?
yeah, I don't think they get along well with anybody, even themselves.
What you said a couple weeks ago on Twitter, I want to get it right, because I thought it was kind of a hot take.
I think you're following me more on Twitter than I do.
Well, look, Twitter, I have not. First off, I've never really been good at it, and I love it as a news aggregation tool. I love the speed of it. I love it has a terrific. I mean, its ease of use is second to none. The fact that it's embeddable on other websites is second to none. It's one of the reasons why Getter and all these other guys, Parler, they never really. You can't take it off these platforms and embed it on a website, in individual, whatever you call a Getter is, or an individual tweet on Getter. You can't embed it onto your website. Maybe not yet. Maybe in the last couple of days that's changed. But I used to love it, and I still Twitter, that is. I used to, and I still kind of do, as so left wing that it is. I mean, there was a tweet today that had 30,000 likes on it of a girl doing a concert in Rockville, Maryland, your backyard.
Yep.
It was, I guess, a heavy metal thing, and some guy goes up there, and she drops her drawers and pees on them on stage. And I'm like, why is this cell phone footage? So it's obviously a viral thing with 30,000 likes.
Viral in more ways than one, possibly.
Yes, that's true.
Or just vile.
But yeah, it was disgusting. It was disgusting. And like, what am I watching? Please don't look. Please don't look. Why am I watching? I got to turn right. But between that and like the Rittenhouse stuff, where, I mean, it's just like Twitter's kind of like murder porn, because they just show everything. You can't avoid it. And not that I'm a prude about this stuff, but I just refuse to participate in sometimes live on-camera killing.
No, it's hard. I'm enough of a news junkie that I feel that I want to see what happens in the world, even when it's horrible.
Yeah.
Because when it's horrible, it's important. So I saw live the Christchurch killings.
Oh, on which platform?
I can't remember if I found it off of Twitter. I won't say who, because I don't want to get that person in trouble, but it was someone prominent who posts sort of on our side, who tweeted it, and I can't remember if that took me to another platform or if I just watched it. I think it probably took me somewhere else. Yeah. But I watched it, and it was like watching a video game. It was truly disturbing. Yeah. But I mean, look, I grew up in a first responder family. I'm used to truly disturbing. It was, and so here it is, where years later it impacts the global conversation. So it's important that I saw it. Yeah. And I saw it in the way that they want to curtail it. But look, there's wars happen all the time, and we show war. Why can't we? I mean, I'm not defending what happened.
Just, I mean, those are military combatants. I mean,
these people were monsters. I mean, they were really, psychotically evil people going into mosque to kill people. Yeah. And to kill innocents. And so, I mean, but we have whole channels devoted, whole history channels devoted to Nazis. Let's face it. The History Channel, if it weren't for Nazis, the History Channel goes away.
Yeah, the Nazi channel.
We know everything except their underwear size. I mean, they're like,
that's all they air.
And so it's important to see evil, because you need to know what you're fighting when you're fighting evil. So I mean, I don't like the censor.
I just don't have the stomach for it. I do. I'm like I said, I can watch it.
I have a harder time with.
I don't feel like retweeting it. I don't feel like if I quote tweet it, and I feel like I'm contributing to.
I have a harder time with a lot of the mobbing particularly of little kids. Yeah. But yes, I mean, it's all about setting your parameters. But you're gonna read my tweet, so I might as well. I don't want to stop you from doing that.
No, so you said you said being anti-vaccine is part of free speech. I want you to explain that.
Well, I mean, it's an opinion. You're allowed to have an opinion in a free society. We have watched as all of the countries you're most likely to want to go visit, particularly the English-speaking ones, Australia, New Zealand, UK, Canada.
I mean, what's going on in Australia?
You know, throw in France and Germany and Italy, and we watch these countries shift so far toward authoritarian nature that Austria is telling, if you don't have the vaccine, you're in lockdown.
Yeah.
And so, look, getting the vaccine or not is a perfect example of choice. It's a private medical choice. You can get the vaccine and still spread the virus. You cannot get the vaccine and spread the virus.
Yeah.
So you're making a decision for you based on your own medical health, based on your own family life, how much you interact with people, what your own fears are, what your own information is. You have freedom to do that.
Well,
and
not for long.
But I mean, I am blessed in a huge way for working for an organization that believes in freedom.
Yeah.
And so I was joking before we went on, that we have pretty much every vaccine position you could probably have in an organization. People are for or against. And I am uncomfortable with having to get a vaccine in an infinite number of boosters. I am.
Yeah.
But I still have gotten the vaccine, and I will get the booster because it gives me a get out of jail free card. I just can go and see my dad who's in long-term medical care, and nobody messes with me.
Well, that's kind of what, you see this bullshit on Twitter about the murders and the crimes, and then over the weekend some rock act, some girl peeing on some guy's head. I mean, it was disgusting. But you can't talk about potential therapeutics. I mean, it's the most ridiculous hypocrisy. And that's why it's just not fun anymore. I mean, Twitter used to be kind of a fun place. Now it's just, it's
1984.
Yeah, I mean, but it's just so left wing. It's like it's being run by a bunch of kids who were stuffed in locker rooms when they were in grade school, and this is
stuffed in lockers. Yeah,
lockers. Yeah, and this is their revenge, to allow just the sickening stuff that you see in society and in every left-wing viewpoint you can imagine. But then if anybody comes with something center-right, or it just gets suppressed, downgraded, suspended, expulsion, all the way down.
Because
the line. It's just not. That's just not fun to me. I mean, there's one thing to know. I want to know what the left's thinking, but to have it every day.
Well, what's best is that it's to watch the suppression where nobody goes up in follower count anymore.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, we know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So you're reaching your followers, and it's just the various ways that they fix the game.
Now you've got CensorTrack, right?
Yep.
So tell us about that. What, if the audience goes to CensorTrack.org, what are they going to find?
Well, we launched CensorTrack.org last year, right in the middle of COVID. In fact, one of the people I got working on it, don't tell your dad, but I've never met her in person. And still hasn't been in the office because she lives just far enough away. It would be a really pain in the butt. And she does a great job. I'm really lucky to have her.
Yeah. So she's doing this all virtual?
All remote.
Remote.
Yeah, and we've got a couple other people involved in it, and we've got a nice team of CensorTrack people. And what we do, we monitor all the major social media and some minor social media if we stumble across something, looking for stuff that is censored in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
Fact checking. You mentioned fact checking earlier. They put when you get fact checked on Facebook, they drop what is known. I love this word, an interstitial.
What the hell is that?
I've
never heard of such a thing.
Okay, you got a post. They just put a little blank screen above it with words.
The warning labels.
Yeah, it says you can't see this. 95% of the people don't click through.
Why? What? You're talking about like an age warning level or warning?
Anything, any warning at all. When they put that through, they kill whatever you posted.
Oh, wow.
So though that D-bag, whoever the hell he was from PolitiFact, who fact-checked your perfectly legitimate post where Joe Biden refers to Satchel Paige as the greatest Negro of his time.
The great Negro of our time.
Great Negro
of the time.
By putting that restriction on it, they suppress people seeing it.
I actually don't think that Facebook the PolitiFact wrote it up, but Facebook hasn't dinged it yet.
Okay, well if they put an interstitial on it, then that just kills its.
Does that promote clicks?
No, it kills it.
It kills it. The distribution of it.
Like that old commercial, kills roaches dead, kills clicks dead. And so, I mean, there's all sorts of ways to do it. They do fact checkers, they do shadow bans, they do restrictions where you can't reply, restrictions where you can't retweet. I mean, do you think they'll go back and do? Because I know they're looking at 3, 4, 5 years back, well, especially for pages on the right. Do you think that they'll go back and redo Steele?
Yeah, reduce the Steele. Any reporting on the Steele dossier as misinformation.
Here's why they won't. These
should put it like an activism campaign to make that happen.
Right, but these fact checks are created to rein in people like us. But the people who misreported Russia were people like them. So it's all about attacking ordinary people who do journalism or non-establishment media outlets who do journalism.
Yeah.
But the people who got that story wrong, the people who chose to get that story wrong, the people who lied for years and years, they did it deliberately. And so they're not going to be fact-checked because the media still, it's still true. No, right. It's actually not true.
Right. Even Schiff said today, he's like, well, I don't have any regrets about sharing that story.
Well, of course not, because in their minds it ended up working. Donald Trump's not president. Their guy is.
There's just no credibility with these platforms. I mean, that's the real killer for me is, I mentioned this to a Politico reporter back in the day, just a few years ago. They were totally on the side of the establishment, in all their coverage, which I guess I knew to some degree they had to be because they're Politico and they're inside Washington, inside the Beltway, so they need to be, they need to be courteous to their sources. But if you're never going to cover sort of the outside worldview of Washington, then you just become this Washington rag with this limited audience.
But they don't care.
And they don't see, that was the guy's point.
They only care about this, man.
Yeah.
Are you bringing in the green?
Yeah, well, and then I remember doing, where was I? I guess I was in a CNN waiting room thing, green room thing. And I was introduced to a producer of the Sunday Politics show. This is back when I guess John King ran it. Yeah. And I asked him, even though I kind of knew the answer, this is 2015, because we were doing something on Trump during the primaries. And I said, so how are the ratings? I knew they were kind of, junky. And he said, with no apologies, he's like, oh, they suck. And he just starts like belly aching laughing. He said, but we were trending on Twitter, and that's all that matters. It was a producer of the show.
Well, because
I just like thinking, like looking back on that now, it's like this sort of synergy between the socials and the networks. I mean, no wonder people are stiff and arm that stuff.
Well, but it's all designed to influence politics. It's not designed to bring in ratings.
Yes.
And so if your job working for Jeff Zucker is to influence politics, if they see you trending on Twitter, that's what they want.
That's what they want. And it's boring.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, it's
just a small finite audience.
But it's like
eventually people are just going to start tuning it out.
Why does anyone care what Joe Scarborough says?
Joe
Scarborough has not said anything significant of note for 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, not anything.
Yeah.
I mean, except maybe, will you marry me to Mika.
Yeah.
Other than that,
I don't know.
But he's watched in the proper demographic, the DC demographic.
Yeah.
And I say this, no one hates conservative voters more than Republican politicians, because everybody comes to Washington, Democrat, Republican, Independent, workers, the K Street people, they all want to come to Washington. They all want to get their cushy jobs. They want to stay.
Yeah.
The only people who want them to go, the only people who want them to do less and take less of our money are conservatives.
Right. Right.
And so they're the enemy of the Washington establishment.
Yeah. Where do you think this FBI thing with O'Keefe is going to land? I mean, does he really have a diary of?
Well, apparently we know the diary exists. You know why we know the diary exists? Because they raided his house.
And it was leaked. The raid was leaked to the New York Times. Correct? Do I have that right?
And it's not just that, but I think they've leaked other stuff about O'Keefe as well. So the deep state is ratting out O'Keefe to try to get their buddies in the press to attack it.
Does he have any? I mean, does he have any friends in the journalism space that will allow him to claim that he's a journalist?
I mean, I think it was Terry Moran from ABC. I even saw tweeting about this, being uncomfortable about what happened. I think a fair number of the press are a little bothered.
Yeah.
But a little bothered doesn't have you standing up going like, hey, stop this crap now, or we're going to start reporting on you.
Yeah.
That's the traditional.
It's like their border coverage. It's just we're a little annoyed that the border might be being overrun.
Yeah. Traditionally, we saw Hunter Biden's a great example of this, why they'll do nothing.
Yeah.
The Hunter Biden scandal occurred. New York Post wrote about it. They were censored first by Facebook and then Twitter. But if you remember what happened, Facebook came out, Andy Stone, a Democrat operative, who's never stopped being a Democrat operative, even though he works for Facebook, came out and said, we're going to restrict who can see that. It didn't follow any of their policies. They simply said, we're going to restrict it.
Right.
To the point where even the evil fact checkers and the International Fact Checking Network comes out a pointer. Even they said that Facebook had not a leg to stand on. It hadn't had any complaints about the post. They've just restricting the content for arbitrary means. Yeah. Because it was trying to fix an election. Yeah. Yeah. So are they going to change? This is working for them.
Yeah, it is.
And here's what they really want.
I mean, it is and it isn't. I mean, that was one of the things at the border that they thought, the American people aren't aware of what's going on. And I said, well, you know what? Biden's sitting with approval ratings in the mid-30s. Kamala is sitting with approval ratings that are lower than Dick Cheney's after he shot somebody in the face. And she's the so-called czar of the problem down there. So, I mean, it's getting out there. I mean, can you imagine if they had any sort of critical coverage of them? All right, Dan, I think we said it all, man.
All right.
All right.
I do as well.
All right, buddy. Thanks for coming on.
It's been a pleasure.